3 months after moving to Canada, I made $48,000. And the wild part, it wasn't from a job. Like, I didn't even have a job back then. It was all from my business that I'd started a while ago. And I was working maybe 4 hours a week. And the crazier part, I earned it all in Indian rupees. Now, if you know the conversion, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about and why that's a big feat. Now, I get it, that sounds impossible. Like, honestly, I thought that this kind of shit was BS too. But it happened, and in this video, I'll walk you through exactly how I pulled it off step by step. Now, if you're sitting there wondering, why should I even listen to this guy sitting in this dingy, weirdly lit room? Well, I'm Akash Damodaran, an entrepreneur, and I've built multiple ventures while working full-time jobs. And today I'm scaling a multi-six-figure media company, which basically started off as a side hustle, and now it's well on track to hitting the $1 million mark. And now I also help other people, people like yourself, build a second income or a profitable business without quitting their day job. And so before we get into the story, if you've been thinking about starting something of your own, then I'm sure you'll be interested in this free resource that I put together. It's 15 steps in 15 days to start a profitable business even while you're employed. It's practical, it's actionable, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. You'll get one step a day straight to your inbox, and you can unsubscribe anytime if it's not useful. Comment, email, or hit the first link in the description to sign up. All right, let's jump in, and let's actually start off by talking about how I too was a skeptic when it came to just working 4 hours a week. There's actually a funny story behind this whole 4 or 5 hours a week thing. When I first came across the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. Like, 4 hours? Come on, dude. Like, who the hell survives, let alone thrives, on 4 hours of work a week? And at that time, I was grinding like insane hours. I was in India just starting my podcast and spending like 70 or 80 hours a week working on content strategy, editing, production, outreach, you name it. So when I saw the book, I assumed it was just another, get rich quick gimmick. And honestly, most people still think that way. But here's the truth that my younger self won't admit. The book isn't really about working only 4 hours a week. It's actually about designing your life, building systems, and focusing on what actually moves the needle. So that eventually, yes, you can reduce your hours massively and still earn more than you ever thought possible. And I'm telling you this because I used to be exactly where you are right now. Thinking that a job is the only way to earn, that there's a ceiling to how much money is possible. I thought making even an extra $500 outside my salary was hard. So if you're skeptical right now, I completely get it, because I was you. But let me show you how that younger, naive version of myself went on to earning $48,000 in just 3 months here in Canada, working only like 4 or 5 hours a week. Because if I could pull it off as a new immigrant here, so can you. Here's the thing though, all of this didn't happen overnight. In fact, my first year building my media business, I made nothing, zero, nothing, zilch, nada. I was working, like I said, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week, editing, planning, pitching, recording. I'm basically living on my laptop. And for an entire year, I had nothing to show for it financially. And honestly, that's the part that no one talks about. Like, everyone wants the sexy headline of, I made like 40, 50, $100,000 in so many months. But what they don't see is the late nights, the doubts, the constant pressure of asking yourself, am I really wasting my time? If you've ever tried to start something of your own, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You're exhausted, you second guess yourself, and it honestly feels like nothing is moving. But here's the truth, right? Like, that year of grinding laid the foundation for everything else that followed. Without it, the $48,000 story would never have happened. And honestly, that's why I always say, and again, it might sound very cliche, but if you want to build something that actually pays you, it's not about hacks or overnight wins, it's about consistency. It's about showing up week after week, even when you're not seeing any results. This is something I actually spoke about in one of my previous videos. I'll leave a link to it at the end of this video. So where things really started to change for me was after that first year of just burning myself out, I realized something. If I kept working like that, I just built myself another job. And honestly, that's not what I wanted. That's not the reason why I quit my job in the first place. So I made a very hard shift. I started building systems and I started delegating. At first, it felt really weird. Like, wait, shouldn't I be editing every single piece of content, even my own podcast? Shouldn't I be the one writing every piece of strategy or script, or even shooting some of my content for my clients? I just couldn't give up control, and it felt like if I didn't do it, no one else will be able to do it correctly. But the honest to God truth is, the more I did everything myself, the slower the business grew. So I asked myself a simple question. Like, what's my hourly rate? Actually, this is something I picked up from the book, The 4-Hour Work Week 2. And the question was, is the task I'm doing really worth my hourly rate? And if the answer was no, I need to find someone else to do it. I had to hire, I had to delegate, I started building templates and I automated. And also by then I was making some money, right? But it was less about money and more about control. It was more about how do I actually get someone else to do the work and deliver the quality that I have in mind. And so eventually when I realized that I was the bottleneck in the freaking business, I had to figure out ways to basically delegate and automate things. And so eventually when I adopted this, those 70 to 80 hour work weeks dropped to around 20 hours. And eventually when I moved to Canada, honestly, it was just about 4 to 5 hours a week because I had my team handling most things. I used to join a call maybe for half an hour to an hour max and then get involved in a little bit of work here and there. But otherwise, it was a well-oiled system. And here's the crazy part. Like the money didn't go down, it actually went up. Because instead of me being stuck in the weeds, I was free to do, the high value work like landing bigger clients and building relationships. Now I know this might sound alien or this part can feel overwhelming, like how do you even start building systems if you're still solo? Or if you feel like you don't have enough money to hire. So I talk about a few of those things in my 15 steps in 15 days to build a profitable business email course. One of the steps is literally about that, how to start building leverage before you think you're ready. Like small shifts that save you hours, even if you're just getting started. So if you're nodding along right now thinking, yep, that's me, check the first link in the description. It's completely free, it'll always be free, and it'll give you a clear system to start with. Okay, so now that we've covered delegation, let's talk about the other big principle that changed the game for me. So once I had my time back, I started applying another principle I first came across in this book. It was basically the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto's principle. You've probably heard of it before, but let me break it down the way it hit me. 80% of your results come from just 20% of your efforts, and when I looked at my own business, it was like crystal clear. Like 80% of my revenue was coming from just a couple of clients. Like 80% of the growth was coming from just a few high value actions like pitching, networking, and just delivering world-class work. Everything else, it was just noise. And most humans tend to overcomplicate things and try to stay busy. I had to kind of steer clear of that. I was prey to that. I actually fell prey to that. But eventually when I started looking at everything under the microscope, and since I had got my time back, I started figuring out the most pivotal or the most important activities out of the lot. And so I doubled down on the 20% that actually moved the needle. And so when I looked at our client roster, I realized that most of our revenue came from a handful of our clients. Like there was just, I think, 3 of them that paid for or made up like 80% of our revenue, which is insane. And so all I had to do was focus on over delivering even more for these clients, because I knew that the customer lifetime value or the client lifetime value or what I could get in return was going to far outweigh the kind of work I was putting in. And so I did that. I started focusing on those clients, and actually just one of those clients actually converted, or we signed a new contract when I moved to Canada. And honestly, that's how I made $48,000 in 3 months. That was literally the contract for, I think, 6 months of work, if I'm not wrong. And all in all, it was literally working just 4 to 5 hours a week, which was freaking insane. Now, I want to pause here and say that obviously this didn't happen overnight, right? Like it wasn't luck. It was like years of laying the groundwork, showing up, building credibility, and then focusing only on the things that mattered the most. Like in this case, it was just delivering to those clients, and that really converted in ways I couldn't even imagine. And here's the part that most people miss, right? Like when you apply the 80-20 rule consistently, it almost feels like you're cheating, because suddenly you're not doing everything, you're only doing the things that create exponential results. So instead of running around doing busy work, you're like level-headed, calm, focused, and hitting results that look impossible from the outside. And this rule doesn't just apply to business, right? Like you can apply this to your job, your fitness, even your relationships. It's about focus and not hustle. A lot of people get caught in this whole hustle and motivation mindset. If it works for you, it works for you. But honestly speaking, you need a system where you can show up day in and day out. And over the course of a few years, you start seeing exponential results. And in this case, you start getting paid a lot more. Now, the 80-20 rule was a massive mental shift for sure. But there was another big concept from this book that I couldn't ignore, and it's called geo-arbitrage. And it completely changed how I thought about money and business. Like for instance, even the way I operate the business today is all based on geo-arbitrage. Now, it sounds fancy, but here's what it really means. It's earning in a strong currency while spending or building in a weaker currency. It's as simple as that. Consulting companies like Deloitte, where I used to work, do this all the time. Like clients pay them in US dollars, and then a lot of the execution is done offshore in India or some other country where the currency is a little weaker. The business model is literally built on this. And I quickly realized, why can't I do the same as an individual? Like that's when it actually clicked for me. Like even when I moved to Canada, like a lot of my team was and still is in India actually for my business. Like back then my clients were paying me in INR, which isn't a strong currency compared to Canadian dollars or US dollars, but because I'd already set up systems and delegated tasks and built processes, I was building a profitable business with very low overheads. And so the craziest part, something I briefly mentioned earlier is that $48,000, it was entirely in Indian rupees, converted to dollars. And even with that conversion, it was substantial. Like it paid for my move, my living expenses, a lot of things I could buy for my family, and gave me the confidence that my business could survive and also thrive no matter where I was in the world. And so if there's one lesson to take away from this part of the video, it's that you don't have to play the game the same way everyone else does. You don't have to only rely on one job in one city with one paycheck. Like in today's world, you can tap into global opportunities, outsource, delegate, and build in ways that stretch your money 2x, 5x, sometimes even 10x further. And when you start thinking like this, it's like you're playing a completely different game than everyone else. And all of this comes down to how do you get equity. Now, geo arbitrage and the 80-20 rule were like game changers, no doubt. But here's one more principle that forced me to rethink how I was spending my time entirely. So I think I spoke about a lot of these practical things that you can use, but I think a lot of this comes down to your beliefs as well. And if you don't believe that time is your most valuable resource, you're screwed. Because a lot of your decisions will be based solely on dollar value. And unless you start treating time as the most important asset in your life, there's a very high chance that you won't be able to kind of start thinking like how these bigger entrepreneurs are thinking. And then you're playing a skewed or an unfair game. So one part of that is just having like an abundance mindset. And the other is, like I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest mindset shifts that happened for me was really realizing that my time is my most valuable asset. The earlier you can realize that, the quicker you can start running. Because when I first started building my media house, I was doing everything myself, like from editing to production to planning, outreach, strategy, and even little admin stuff. And that's why I was working like 60 to 70 hours a week. And honestly, it nearly burnt me out. Actually, it burnt me out a couple of times. And then I came across this saying somewhere that really got me thinking. Like if your business cannot run without you, you don't have a business. You just have a glorified job. And that honestly hit me hard. So I started building systems and I figured out repeatable processes and then automated as much as I could. And so once I did that, the next step was basically delegation. So I brought on a small but mighty team, and never more than like 4 or 5 people at our peak, but I gave them ownership of editing, design, client delivery, a lot of my work that I was doing earlier. And my job, like I mentioned earlier, became focusing on the stuff that actually moved the needle, closing clients, strategy, building relationships, and making sure our quality stayed in the top 1%. Everything else, I tried my best to delegate. And honestly, that's how I went from that whole 70, 80 hour burnout weeks to just working like a few hours every week. And I might be talking about this in a business context, but this doesn't just apply to running a business. Even if you're still in a 9 to 5, you can start thinking this way. Like what can you systemize in your daily life? What can you automate? What can you delegate? And that's basically what these leaders are thinking about. Like for me, even outside of the business, that look like, getting ready to eat meals instead of having to cook every single day. Like I don't cook a single meal. That's because I feel it's a better use of my time. Instead of cooking, that I focus on the business and actually pay a little bit of a premium to get ready to eat meals every single week. Like another way I can think about this is, my wife and I pay like pretty exorbitant rents to live in downtown so that we can walk instead of having to commute 2 hours. Like all these microsystems basically free up my time so I can reinvest into building my business. Now, all of this sounds great after the fact, but honestly, when I was there, like delegation felt really uncomfortable at first, like especially if you're a perfectionist like me. Even today, it's not easy for me. Like you want everything done your way. But the minute you let go and trust others to handle 80% of the work, that's when you buy back your freedom. And since I already have you here, I spoke about the abundance mindset, I spoke about time, but I think another thing that a lot of people don't think about enough is having something like an ideal life design. It's not just making money, but building freedom and figuring out what your lifestyle needs to look like. And I think that's another thing that the 4-hour work week touches on time and again. Like, the craziest part of this whole journey of building my business, it wasn't basically this earning $48,000 in 3 months. It wasn't even working 4 hours a week. It was realizing that money alone doesn't mean freedom. Like, if you're still chained to a job you hate, or if your lifestyle forces you to show up every single day just to maintain, then honestly, you're just stuck in this whole golden handcuffs phase. Like, I remember even when I was at Deloitte, I started asking myself, what does my ideal day actually look like? Like, for me, that meant having control of my time. Being able to take a random Tuesday off if I felt like it. Like, traveling when I wanted to, and not just relying on when my boss approves my vacation days. And also, like, building businesses that run without me having to be in the weeds 24/7. Like, I didn't want to wait like most people, like 30, 40 years to retire just to enjoy a couple of vacations at 65. Like, that's not freedom in my opinion. And the crazy part, it all started with keeping an open mind and realizing that life doesn't have to follow the conventional script. And so if there's one thing for you to do today, something practical you can try today, is just sit down and write out your dream day. Like, not your dream car or your dream house, your actual dream day. Like, what do you see yourself waking up and doing? Because the moment you're clear on that, like, every business system, every side hustle, every dollar you earn has a purpose. And it's not something that you'll achieve like overnight, or it's not something you can achieve in like the next few years maybe. But in my case, I know that if I put in the effort right now, there's a high chance that I can enjoy it when I'm in my 40s and probably into my 50s. So the instance when I fell off the wagon was after moving to Canada. I had to go back to a full-time job, like a day job. And that meant that I couldn't scale my business at the same rate or the same scale that I planned, or at least was doing back in India. And honestly, it's what gave me the clarity to focus on building systems, taking on fewer but higher quality clients, and reinvesting that time into building exactly the life I wanted. And listen, if you've been feeling stuck, like running in circles with no real control, like, you need to hear this. There's no rule book saying you can only earn X dollars a year. Like, there's no ceiling on how much money you can make or how much freedom you can create. Like, this all ties back to that whole abundance mindset I mentioned earlier. The only limits are the ones you accept. Like, most people settle into the hamster wheel of life. They get entrenched in the whole rat race. Like, they accept the golden handcuffs and they think they have to wait decades to live life on their own terms. But honestly, you don't. Like I mentioned earlier, the limits are only what you set for yourself. All it takes is showing up, being consistent, and focusing on the right things and not everything. And listen, if you've been thinking about building your own business, side hustle, or second income, but you don't know where to start, I've got you covered. Like I mentioned earlier, I've created a free email course called 15 Steps in 15 Days to Build a Profitable Business even while working full-time. It's a mix of psychology, strategy, and habits that help you actually make money, not just dream about it. It's been getting incredible feedback already, and I think it could be the best way to kickstart your journey. The link's in the description, or you can comment, email, and I'll send it over to you. It's totally free, and you can unsubscribe anytime you want. And while you're down there, hit the subscribe button, because I've got a ton of content coming that'll help you design the exact life you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.